So for our second panel, we have 2021 predictions from 163,000 analysts and AI. I'm sure you were probably thinking, what was that? But before we start the panel discussion with our star panelists that we have today, I would like to do a quick intro of Syndicator's hybrid intelligence. Can everyone see my screen? Great. So since 2015, Syndicator merged wisdom of the crowd with AI to predict future events. And over the past 5 years, we've accumulated 163,000 registrants from 135 countries who make forecasts about the market. And then we enhance this data by running it through our machine learning algorithms. The platform is available on App Store, Google Play, and also as a web application. And you can scan the QR code or visit Syndicator website. I'll leave the link in the chat. We previously successfully predicted the market reversal of Corona crisis. We also predicted Brexit results, Biden and Trump elections. And for years, we specialized in predicting the crypto market and we've developed algorithmic strategies of these predictive analytics, and we execute these strategies with our in-house trading platform. So we would like to share our 7 juicy predictions for 2021. And joining with us on the discussion, we are extremely fortunate to have celebrities in both the worlds of crypto and AI. We have Constantin Kogan from Wave Financial and Jesus Rodriguez from Into the Block. Thank you so much for your patience. I know we are overrunning a bit. So could you please tell us a bit about yourself, Constantin?
Well, first of all, hi, it's a pleasure of being here. And for celebrity, I don't consider myself as a celebrity, but listen, I will take that, so no problem. So yeah, it's an honor to be here. And so a few words about myself. I'm a partner in Bitbull Capital, and I'm a managing director in Wave Financial, and been researching crypto since 2012. I've been investing myself. Personally have a career like starting from future trading and then spot trading, and slowly I would say evolved into more like deeper dive into the crypto hole. Yeah, now I consider myself a person who is just a supporter of this new movement, and try to do it on all levels. Ben Tsai, my colleague, was in a previous panel. He basically introduced Wave, so I'll just say a few words. We regulate it. We hold an IRA license, and we do a lot of research, and we invest in projects. We have several hedge funds we're running, so happy to be here.
Thank you, Constantin. Jesus, would you like to share more about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, and a quick intro about myself. I'm a computer scientist by trade, distinguished engineer at Microsoft, where I run the first technical team that built the Azure Cloud Platform, did a tenure building quant systems in prestigious Wall Street firms like DRW, a couple of exits as an entrepreneur these days, so became an active investor these days. I'm the CEO and chairman of Into the Block. We're a venture-backed crypto analytics platform that uses like very cutting-edge data science, machine learning, deep learning techniques to extract intelligence about crypto assets, and also have a second division that works with some of the top hedge funds in the market building quant strategies for both CeFi and DeFi, very focused on using deep learning signals. So to this day, Into the Block in 18 months has over 120 clients, including some of the top brands in crypto and over a dozen of the top hedge funds in the market.
Thank you so much. So we'll go through each of the prediction one by one. So at Syndicator, we have 163,000 analysts who make predictions, but we have identified super forecasters amongst them who are the top 0.02% of the crowd. So you will find two segments, the crowd and super forecasters. So the first question we've asked to the crowd was, enter 5 tickers you would long until the end of 2021. And we can see that Bitcoin is leading for the crowd, but Ethereum is the top choice for super forecasters. Jesus, maybe you would like to give us some thoughts on the projection for Bitcoin and its significance for this year.
Look, I tend to look at things more from a sort of a mathematical instead of the macro standpoint. But if I have to relate to this prediction, I'll say obviously Bitcoin has the eyes of the institutional investors. A lot of the institutional adoptions, the bigger institutions entering the market, Bitcoin is the preferred vehicle. Ethereum is also obviously pushed by mechanisms like decentralized finance and NFTs and movements like that are happening in the Ethereum space. DeFi in particular is fascinating. What's happening there. So that in terms of acceleration, I think Ethereum is definitely a good place to be, but keep in mind that just every institution like PayPal or Square or MicroStrategy that enters the space is certainly consolidating Bitcoin's dominance more and more.
Constantin, do you have some points to add?
Yeah, I actually would agree. From a macro perspective, I think that Bitcoin will still hold its dominance just because that is something, as a previous panel, we're talking about it. So just not to repeat that, Bitcoin is just easier to explain. It's like, so it plays the role of store of value and this digital gold concept. So it's just easier for bigger institutions to enter it first, and therefore the billions, so if not trillions of dollars will flow there. And then like as a cascading principle, then it will go further, like, with a deeper analysis of other alternative crypto assets, like, then I think, yeah, I would agree actually with this potential chart. I do, I do think that it's interesting. It struck me, like, the prediction about XRP. I mean, I get it, like why super forecasters like recently were a bit bearish, I would say. But it's interesting, the gap between the crowd and the super forecasters for the XRP, just astonishing. And I do think the ADA is a little bit undervaluated because we personally do a lot of research on Cardano, and I should say that the things that are rolling out, like they're going to be exceptional this year. So they might actually outperform like DOT or Link, potentially. So
Yeah.
that'll be my 2 cents.
So looking a little bit into details here, like I don't. I mean, it's hard for me to think about what would be a good trend for something like Litecoin. I mean, Litecoin is a project that I always had a hard time understanding its value in this day and age. Things like I agree with the sentiment around XRP and ADA. UNI is particularly interesting. I was actually looking this morning. I had to do a different session for the North American Bitcoin Conference, and I was looking at a few governance tokens. And today they look amazing. Like Comp, UNI, mostly 100% of the token holders have realized profits these days, but just a few months ago that wasn't the case. Like I remember doing a couple of sessions about DeFi and showing some analysis about this. It was a horrible investment, and just happened that the rally in DeFi has completely turned things around. But it's very interesting how much weight super forecasters are placing in something that is essentially a governance token.
And if I may add, I actually think the Sterling Lumen, like, also like might be it's a great project, so nothing to against it, but I think that with the advance of DeFi, such projects as Aave and Synthetics, they might actually become one of the top 10 contenders. Like, that's with the movements and the news that are floating there. Like, I actually consider they're probably going to be top 10 like sooner than we think about it.
Yeah, Bitcoin and Ethereum are obviously front runners. I think if you need to pick things that could have asymmetrical return, I mean, I have to say, the Polkadot is certainly fascinating. The race from the launch to where they are today, it just seems like one of those projects that could give Ethereum some headaches in the long term. And certainly, despite of the controversies, and these guys are a client of Into the Block, but Chainlink, I think, is very interesting. It fills a gap in the market, and their performance has been sustained through different market cycles. So it's very interesting to see what's going to happen with them.
Just to wrap up this this particular forecast, I would also like to mention that Uniswap was very we received a very high number of mentions in Uniswap. That kind of makes sense because everyone's using Uniswap to get all these DeFi gems. So it will be very interesting to note if the liquidity, or like if these interest might actually outperform Binance, which is the centralized exchange. And we'll see if the market cap for Uniswap might actually outperform BNB this year. So we can go on to the next prediction. So we'll just touch on this. So what we do at Syndicator is that we ask the crowd twice a week what their thoughts are, what their predictions are for the maximum price and the minimum price for Bitcoin throughout 2021. And the most recent reading we took from the crowd, which was just 3 days ago, expects Bitcoin to reach 60K as all-time high and 20K as all-time low. By the way, this is not an investment advice. This is just the thought that comes from these 163,000 analysts. So maybe it's still January, and if Constantin or Jesus, if you could give like a quick stab at what you think at the max price or minimum price might be for Bitcoin for the coming 11 months.
Jesus, I'll let you start.
Oh, please, no. I'm not brave enough.
Well, to be frank, I really hate this type of questions. I appreciate the ability to predict something like that, but it's so tricky because there's so many factors on in the space. I would say let's put it this way: instead of predicting or like disapproving some of these predictions, I've recently listened to some of the thought process of one of the top investors in the industry, and like who I really admire, Cathie Wood, and her stance on very systematic of how she approaches things. And in their prediction and in ARC, they look at a lot of parameters, and I would say one of the ideas that she introduced that recently OCC allowed federally chartered banks to custody Bitcoin. That the banks allowed now to use blockchain nodes, for the faster and cheaper settlement. Previous panel talked about the new SEC chairman Gensler, who is very pro crypto, and he taught at MIT. So I think, and if we look at the opportunities of how the treasury play will come out, and more companies will actually, as MicroStrategy, Square, etc., will actually allocate billions of dollars into crypto. I think if this trend will continue, honestly, the sky is the limit, because it's very early, and it's still I actually closely follow all of the major companies right now, who are allocating to crypto and for the treasury play, and it's only 40 billion at this moment as we speak. I believe once it's going to get to at least $1 trillion, so then the price would reflected probably one and a half times, like at least. So that is the probability I actually look through.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, so good thing I didn't have to say that I hate the question first, but Niels Bohr, the one of the fathers of quantum computing, used to say that predictions are really hard, particularly about the future. So this type of thing is just really, really hard to forecast. I spend the bulk of my days in sort of medium frequency type predictions. So I could be inferred with data points from a more pragmatic standpoint. And one of the things that we learn is the longer you go in a time horizon, it's harder to make an accurate forecast. For something like this based on macro factors, it's just really hard. There is a lot of factors that are pushing momentum for Bitcoin. Fundamentally, institutional adoption. We have to think that there is going to be multiple corrections along the way. But if you want an analogy, like I think 2020 has tested a lot of the fundamental thesis around Bitcoin, whether it's an inflation hedge, whether it behaves like digital gold, like many things like that. And there are numerous theories, but at this point, Bitcoin behave like a highly volatile equity. And I even published an article about this in CoinDesk or somewhere that I think more than a highly volatile equity is what in quant circles is called a high sentiment beta equity. That is a type of stocks, and when large cap stocks are trending, that type of equity tends to trend like twice as with as much momentum. So from that standpoint, if you think what's really happening with highly volatile stocks, what's happening with Tesla, with GameStocks and things like that, you can see multiple rallies happening in Bitcoin, and it's probably the closest analogy. Now, is it going to be 60,000 or 600,000? I have no idea. One thing that I learned in my quant days is that we tend to overestimate 12 months. So a lot of people, when they make forecasts based on macro, they tend to overestimate 12 months and underestimate, like 60 months or things like that.
If I may add to this analogy, because I love the comparison with high sentiment beta. Like, and it is like, if you look at the entire market cap, it's actually as one large cap like stock. That's the entire market cap of Bitcoin. So, but what is interesting, the comparison, if S&P 500 companies would put 1% of their entire volume into Bitcoin, the price will probably be increased by 40,000 for like in one shot. Now, whether it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, that's a big question, right? But this is just another analogy to see how it may play out.
Thank you so much.
There might be a couple of other things conspiring to push, like fixed income being mostly nowhere, right? Like there is not a whole lot of investment going on in fixed income right now with interest rates on the floor. So a lot of that money is going to move into alternative, and Bitcoin could be one of those.
Great. So we have a few more predictions to share. So I'll go on to the next one. We have like 4 more. So would the total value locked in DeFi hit $50 billion in 2021? And our crowd gave an assurance around 80%. So that's kind of like probability that this event would happen. And super forecasters also predicted around the same. I know we've kind of touched on DeFi, and personally, I think I also feel like similar, because I've had some experience looking at some new DeFi coins that were like less than 24 hours old. And then there's like millions of dollars being locked in there because people are trying to do this yield farming and changing across different coins and all that. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on the total value locked in DeFi for this year.
Yeah, so here I might have an opinion. So we do a lot of work in this space. Into the blog today, there is over 60 analytics just for DeFi protocols, and we build high frequency trading and passive investment strategy, quant strategies with funds in DeFi. So we have been tracking the activity here very, very closely. In terms of a macro thesis of the market, 50 billion is actually not crazy. It's aggressive. But I heard multiple tier 1 VC firms sort of refer around this number, and there could be a couple of events that could catalyze that, right? Like more activity in AMMs and things like that. I think in DeFi overall, there are two trends that are not going away. One is lending, and another one is automated market makers. I think there is a lot of other peripheral things happening, but I think those two trends are driving the momentum, and they're likely to be here for the long haul. Now, the thing that to realize about DeFi is that a lot of what's driving the activity is yield farming and things like that, and that's likely to correct, or even in some scenarios go away at some point, right? It cannot continue going like that forever because we wouldn't have a market, right? It has to become more efficient. So at one point, we have to ask, like, you know, when yield farming is really not there, when that party ends, right? When the music stops, like, what's a real value of DeFi? And I think it's related to the programmability, the automation that it brings to automate financial primitive in a way that we haven't been able to do before. A good metric to track, I think value log is misleading as hell, but a good metric that I think is a good indicator of the ecosystem is how much money is moving from Bitcoin into DeFi. I think that one is always something.
上面那个副将生，你就不错，还蛮多东西吃啊。
Sorry, I was saying if you pay attention to how much fundings are moving from Bitcoin into DeFi and vice versa, that's always a good indicator of the market.
Thank you. If everyone can mute other than the panelist, thank you. That would be great. So shall we go on to the next question? Will the SEC approve Bitcoin ETF in 2021? Crowd had a higher sentiment towards that approving, and super forecasters are quite low, 55%. What are your thoughts?
Probably I will start, like, also like a quick 2 cents on the previous one. I do agree with Jesus, and if we look at the like total TVL, like, you know, just starting from October, it was about 10 billion, like, you know, and TVL, and then now we are roughly right now at 25 billion. So I don't think the prediction is crazy about 50 billion. It's quite realistic. To briefly go about the ETF, again, it's it's a attempt number 24, or we don't know the exact number, so it's really hard to predict as well. I would say, if we're going to stay over $1 trillion market cap for a significant amount of time, and we like, the more institutions are going to come into play, and we hear the news about the BlackRocks of the world are coming in, and derivatives market are becoming more robust, the new liquidity entering the market. So I think it's quite realistic. Now, whether it's going to happen, to be frank, I have no idea.
Yeah, I think I'm more skeptical, and particularly in a year, in a 12-month cycle, new administration that has a lot of things to deal with, an asset class that is still, I mean, it has to reach multiple $1 trillion. I think Constantin was referring to Kathy Good in a previous question. She just was on record today saying that it's probably Bitcoin needs to get to a 2 trillion or something market cap before an ETF becomes realistic, and she knows a thing or two about ETFs. So I think in a 12-month cycle might be aggressive, but you know, it's, I mean, who knows?
Okay, we'll go on to the next ones. I think we have just three more. Let's go really quickly on these. will stablecoins exceed 100 billion in terms of market cap in 2021? We have quite high sentiment. Do you guys have any insights on stablecoins and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, we track also this very carefully. I think, again, the macro numbers seem a little bit high, but there is a ton of activity, obviously a ton of activity in Asia. So if you look at something like Tether is disproportionately used in Asia. And I think a lot of DeFi is also moving the space. So there is a ton of activity in liquidity pools with stable coins. And it's a good gateway to get in and out of DeFi protocols, so it's becoming more and more adopted. And if you think what Tether, the type of questions we were asking about Tether a couple of years ago and where it's at today, it gives you a good indication of the maturity of the space. So not sure about 100 billion, but definitely here to stay. And one thing is, you know, if there is a push by a government central bank with a stable coin, or whatever happened with Project DM from Facebook is, I mean, it could be a catalyzer to all this.
I would agree with Jesus. I think it's proportionally going to grow with the entire market cap of the industry. If you look at it right now, it's 25, like just Tether itself has 25 billion market cap. And I think as Bitcoin and other crypto assets will grow, it will also increase the needs of stable coins to grow together with other crypto assets, just because people sometimes have to go out of the positions in Tether. And by the way, I think you and Syndicator know it pretty well, right? You know, because your models are constructed with taking into account the Tether as well. So yeah, I think a very simple answer, yes.
Okay, the next one. So I think we went around the question around DeFi hitting 50 billion in terms of total value staked. Ethereum, will it hit 10 billion, which is like 20% of the whole DeFi? Both crowd and especially the super forecasters mentioned 88% likelihood of that happening. Do you guys agree or disagree?
Go ahead, Constantin.
I love you throw me under the bus for this tough questions.
I mean, we can go on to the next one. I mean, these are the sentiments.
No, it's fine. We actually wrote one of my colleagues, you know, Jim Melinar, we co-authored Ethereum 2.0 research paper. It's on our website, so available. We didn't predict any prices there, but we just analyzed one of the vulnerabilities and one of the benefits and like just the core ideas. In a nutshell, I think 10 billion, it's not a crazy number. I would say there are different type of concerns that we discussed in the research paper. Not to, you know, we don't have enough time to discuss it today, but that will be different questions which I would ask about Ethereum 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, this one is not that hard. Like if you just look at the rate it's growing, it's probably very, very likely. I mean, just a basic statistic get us there. So this is one that is probably highly likely to be true.
And the fact that all the DeFi assets are traded against Ethereum, I think this event is quite likely to reach. And lastly, and this one's the last one, we can touch upon the main trends that we gathered for 2021. So as mentioned in the first panel, the growing mass adoption came top. 55% of the participants answered this as the priority, and also the main trend that's going to happen in 2021, as well as DeFi. I think you guys might have like a few points to add around perhaps like institutional adoption or any other topics.
Well, here, if you don't mind, Jesus, I can start because this topic probably I've recently researched the topic of institutional adoption pretty in details, and I would say Fidelity Digital Assets did a great research where they interviewed about 700 different institutional players across the United States and Europe, and 1/3 of them actually are now participating, like, you know, and invested in digital assets. So this is becoming like a fiduciary responsibility for financial advisors, any top asset managers, to allocate at least a portion, like, you know, whatever that might be, like 1 or 5% of their portfolio to digital assets, because it's, you know, for the past 10 years, one of the top, if not the top, like, you know, best performing asset class in the world. So they're looking at quite serious on it. And I think that will, I don't know, like in the macro context, what is growing adoption in general, whether it's retail, institutional, but I would bet highly on institutional adoption, because this will bring a lot of scrutinies from the regulation standpoint of view. This will bring a lot of confidence from the markets, and this will require us to review a lot of misconceptions about crypto right now.
Look, if this forecast is true, I think we're gonna have a really boring year. So one of the things that we should love about markets is the unknowns, right? Like, I think crypto in particular, it can enable so many things. I mean, where was DeFi in 2019? Nobody could have forecasted that in terms of the adoption in 2020. So I think there is room for a category that is not on that list to be a catalyzer in the market. I'm shocked at the 3% market correction. So I'll put market correction at 200% if you ask me right now, like tomorrow, like it might happen, right? So I don't know what type of correction, but this week we're probably gonna have one. I think that that's a given. As Constantin said, you know, institutional adoption seems to be a trend. DeFi, it could obviously, everybody's very concerned with regulators in DeFi, what that impact could cause. But other than that, the trend is fascinating. There is really strong IP being created. NFTs is very intriguing. It's very strong. And then I will say, for other things that we haven't seen, that we're not, you know, treasuries was not a thing a few months ago, and now it is. And so we might, you know, the part of the magic of crypto is that it could surprise us. So.
Well, thank you so much, and I think we have to wrap up now, because we it also leads on to very nicely onto institutional players in crypto. But before we start, we want to take